we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at this little Hampshire wood. And we're going to start in March, and we're going to go through looking at it in March, then April, and then in May. So it's going to show us what we've got to come, how exciting things and colourful things become. Now, the picture you're looking at now is taken about the same time of year as it was taken last year, but about the same time in March as this year. And you can see the wood's quite bare, really. And you can see from the picture here that it's being managed a bit. So there is some management. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the wood and show you it on the map. And then we're going to go through the months, March, April, and May. So onto the next screen, the map here shows this little wood in Hampshire and how it fits into its kilometre square. So you can see it's quite small. And it's surrounded on, it's on this southwest side, it's got a minor road. And it's classified as a sink. That's a site of interest for nature conservation. So it's ancient, semi-natural ancient woodland. And ancient semi-natural woodlands are ones that have been occurred naturally but have been used by humans over the centuries, and the woodlands that are classed as ancient are over 400 years old. So this little scrap of woodland here is over 400 years old, but as you can see on the map, it's not surrounded by any other woodland. There are some hedgerows and routeways to it, but it's really out on its own. Now, the little wood, which is often called a copse, covers an area of about 2.41 hectares, which is just a smidgen under 6 acres. And this funny line here, that is a boat, which is a track, as a byway open to all traffic. It's not actually used very much. I think the farmer just uses it to get into his fields. And then there's a real footpath through it, but there are lots of little other footpaths that wend their way through the wood. So the ancient woodland has got lots of different species in it, which are indicator species of ancient woodland, showing that it's been there as a wood for a long time. And although these vary in the UK, they all share the fact that the wood has got to be ancient. Now, I'm going to say a thank you now to people who helped me, so I don't forget at the end. So as my friends who helped me survey the woodland, my husband who's taken many of the photographs, and then there are photographers who have licenses that let me use this for non-commercial purposes, and I put their ID. So we're starting off in March. And this is what it looks like along that boat. You can see it's not really very exciting yet. There's a steepish bank up here, and ancient woods often have a steep bank. So this is the first thing that we saw, which were the Hazel Catkins. And close by, if you look carefully, are the female catkins. I'm sorry, I can't see the pictures on the right of my screen, so I hope I'm talking about them properly. But
yeah, you are. It's fine.
Yeah, so that's the female catkin. Can you see it without people, or are people in your picture?
No, the picture on your screen, Jill, and you. That's all.
Oh, that's fine, because I've got pictures of people, and so these are the male catkins, and the little female catkins have to be looked for, but they're quite small. And near the entrance to the wood was this was last March, was this wood spurge. And you can see it's just beginning to flower. we'll see it looking a bit happier later, but it's still really quite wintry. Now this is a spindle, which is an ancient woodland indicator species, and I've just put it in to show that it looks as if it's waiting for summer. Really, it looks a bit sorry for itself. So that's on a bank on the edge of the wood. I'm not very good at pronouncing the Latin, but it's Euonymus europaeus. And then also there were some leaves here. This is a patch of leaves, and we'll see what, I don't know what size screen people have, but they should be able to identify some of the things. So we're going to have a look. There's cow parsley coming there. There's lords and ladies or cuckoo pint. There's another one which I can't see from behind the screen, but I think it's hogweed. There's common nettle down there, and tucked up here we've got common ivory, Heterohelix. So all those things are promising, but not yet properly out. Now dog's mercury around as well. That comes, it's dioecious. There's a male and a female, one of these, and so they're on separate plants. The male flowers and the female flowers are separate, and I think it's quite poisonous. I think if dogs nibble it, they don't have a happy end. We can see here lesser celandine. It's lovely, starry, peeping out, giving us, showing us that it's spring. And there are several types of lesser celandine. There's Vicaria verna, and there's Fertilis, which sets seed and grows from seed, but there's also Vicaria verna, which has little bulbils, and that doesn't really set seed very much, but both of those are found throughout the range of the lesser celandine, which is pretty well universal in the country, I think. Now this is the minor road. And going along the minor road here, you get a good look over this side at the woodland edge. It is a bit taking your life into your hands, because cyclists with ones in black lycra and the sort of rather swish bikes come down here very, very quickly, and you don't hear them. They usually had headphones on, so they don't hear you either. And also the road can be taken up with huge agricultural vehicles that sort of take up nearly the entire road. So we're going to walk along the road a little bit. Here there's some wood anemone, an anemone nemorosa. You can tell that it's not a sunny day. They're sort of closed up, and they'll look happier later when we see them next month. And then primroses. There are two varieties of primrose. There's called thrumide, which have the stigma pointing up, and there's pinnide that have the other way around. Pinnide, which have the stigma pointing up, and thrumide, which have the stamens pointing up. And they will fertilize with the same type, but you get much better seed if you have a thrumide and a pinnide that fertilize each other. The seed is much better and more viable. Here we've got a barren strawberry, and you can tell that it's a barren strawberry because its petals are so separated that you can see the sepals underneath. And also can't really see it very well from this picture, but the leaves, if you've just got a vegetative plant, you can see that the very terminal little point here is about the same on a length as the two side ones at the top. So it doesn't stick out too much. You can see it a little bit better here. So when we come to look at the ordinary wild strawberry later, you'll be able to see the difference. Now these of course are pussy willow, catkins of goat willow, Salix caprea. They're sort of oval shaped, and the male catkins have sort of little black scales there. And here we've got some ground ivy, Glaucoma hederaceae, just poking through the vegetation. Nice bright blue, nice bright colour for March. Now we've come to the end of the bit on the road, and this is the side of the wood on the western side, and there's a very deep ditch here. So that's another thing that ancient woodland often has a banks, which it had on the other side, and a deep ditch over here. It's so deep we couldn't actually get in to have a look, a close-up look of the tree, so it's quite steep and deep. And this is just lovely lichen, which is another ancient woodland indicator species. I don't know whether this species is particularly indicative of ancient woodland, but it's just a nice picture. The holly was just coming into flower, which is rather nice. And there's male that again, it's male holly and female holly are on different plants. So it's only the female ones, of course, that produce the red berries. And that's the woodland floor in March, covered with the promise of bluebells, but not anything much showing yet. Now, there was one precocious bluebell plant showing in March, and this was it. It's Hyacinthoides non-scripta, and it's producing very early flowers. Now, I've put in the corner here whether these plants are ancient woodland indicator species, and this is one of them. And this is just a garden escape, but nice and cheerful, garden daffodil. And cherry plum, Prunus sessifera. It's well, it's nice, bright, lots of orange anthers on there. So we've got the cherry plum here, and I always thought you could tell the cherry plum from blackthorn by the colour of the stalk. And cherry plum, I thought, always had a green stalk. In fact, it's sometimes dark on the top and green underneath. But a couple of weeks ago, we found a form called Nigra that had dark, well, it was a purpley one, had dark purpley stalk on the flower, but it was definitely a cherry plum, and just fairly faint pink flowers. So it isn't always right to say that cherry plum always has green stalks on it, whereas blackthorn over here has always on dark blackish brownish stalks, and it's more clustered, and it's got sort of cherry plum has flowers more or less all along the stem, and blackthorn is more clustered. Cherry plum is earlier. And at the north of the little woodland, there'd been planted trees. I think they were probably millennium trees, but you can see it's no leaves about yet, still looks very wintry. And this is a view towards the downs in March, and it doesn't really look as if spring has arrived yet properly. But come April, things will change. Now, this is how the woodland was in April. The weather got better for a start. It was sunny, and I hope you're going to imagine lots and lots of bird song here, because that's what it was like, bird song all over the place. And the bluebells were out. We've got several pictures of the bluebells. So that's one. And there's another view of bluebells. And this is the native bluebells, Hyacinth non-scripta. And here you can see that it's got the native bluebell characteristics. It's sort of one-sided and the flowers are drooping a bit. The sides of the bluebells are sort of more or less parallel, forming a kind of parallel tube, and they curl up at the ends and twist back a bit. And if you look at the anthers, they are cream, always cream in our native bluebells, and they're fragrant. And the leaves are a bit narrower than the other types of bluebells, but there is an overlap. So then to be a native bluebell, they've got to be one-sided, drooping, parallel tube. And here we've got the other bluebells. We've got the hybrid bluebell. This is the one that's often sold in garden centres and people have in their gardens. And they call it Spanish bluebell, but it isn't. It is in fact a hybrid between Hyphoides non-scripta and Hispanica. So it's Massartiana. You can see it's much more all round the stem, and the flowers are held more upright, and it's got sort of curly, less curly bits at the end, and it has, sorry, go back, and it has blue anthers. The pink and the cream variety, they have cream anthers, but the blue ones always have blue anthers. And over here you can see it's an entirely different thing. This is a Spanish bluebell, and it's sort of much more upright, much wider, more bell-shaped, and we don't really see that in the wild very much in gardens. Now you can see the sun's out. There are the wood anemones, really cheerful, really bright and starry. They have a sort of musky smell, but it's not really very strong. Now these are other things we found. This is the wild strawberry. You can see that it's different from the barren strawberry that we saw before, because the petals are close up together and you can't see the sepals between them. And the leaves have got a bit more of a little point at the end. Then there's wood avens and herb Robert, Geranium robertanum, and there's the wood spurge, really wide open. You can see it's got bracts around and crescent-shaped glands. I don't know if you can see those because it's quite small, but nice and bright and cheerful. There's greater stitchwort. It has 5 petals, but they're deeply divided, so it looks like 10. And cow parsley. Now there's a lot of this in the wood, muscatel, often called town hall clock. It's because it's got flowers on each of the side of it and a little one on the top. So, and it's got lots of leaves which are seen all over the ground. It was very, very obvious where there had been some work going on. The woodland floor was just covered with it. It's quite small, but it's really rather lovely. Now, this is another woodland. I'll go back a bit. This was another woodland path, and although it doesn't show it here, along each side of it, it was mauvey blue colour, and that was because the Woodspeedwell, well, Veronica montana, was all along each side. So that is another ancient woodland species. It's hairy all round. And when it's not in flower, it could be confused with Germander speedwell, Veronica comidries. But this Woodspeedwell always has stalked leaves, and the Germander speedwell has leaves with very, very short stalks. I know lots of people identified Germander speedwell because it has 2 rows of hairs along the stem here, but in fact, if it's young or in the shade, it is hairy all round. And these speedwells were in the wood as well as ivy leaf speedwell, Veronica hedrifolia, subspecies hedrifolia, and you can see it's all got bluey flowers. And also, which I can't see because it's covered with pictures of people, there's the shady woodland one, Veronica, I can't see. Oh, I've done it now. Veronica hedrifolia, subspecies lucorum, which is a sort of mauvey colour and is a bit sprawlier than this one. There's meant to be a difference in the leaves, but one's meant to be longer than wide, but it's very difficult to tell. Now I've got Woodruff, which is lovely. It's really sort of nicely scented. And a friend of mine told me to press one in one of my flower books. And every time I open up the flower book and with the pressed flower, I get the scent of Woodruff. You can see that it's a gallium, like the bedstraws in that family. And the cuckoo flower, which is in the damper areas. So that is in the bittercress family. Well, it's like the bittercress, it's a cabbage family. And you can see that it's really pretty, grows in damp places, different colours, and it's called different names as well. So it's called milkmaids in some places, lady's smock in some places, and I think there are a lot of other different local names for it. There's a lot of this in the wood too, Goldilocks buttercup, and you can see it often has not incomplete flower heads. The petals here are missing. Sometimes they're missing completely. Sometimes they're nearly always there. And it's got very feathery stem leaves. And the violets that we found in the wood were common dog violet and early dog violet. And going to have a look in a minute about the differences between the two. So this is the common dog violet, and you can see it's got a very stout spur here, which is notched, and the spur is much lighter than the petals. In the early dog violet, you can see that it's almost the same color, or perhaps even darker than the petals. It's not quite as sturdy and sort of pouchy as the common dog violet, and it's got only a little bit of a notch. There's another difference as well. There's a thing called sepal appendages, which you can see quite clearly on this one, and they're quite big on the common dog violet, Viola riviana, and not so much so at all on, they're really quite titchy on the early dog violet. There is, some people say that these two upper sepals on the early dog violet are more spread apart, but that's quite difficult to tell. I've just dropped my mouse. Right. And some people also say that there are more different divisions in these veins, but it isn't always very easy to tell. So here we've got some more pictures of bluebells and the sunshine with birdsong. And along there, the lane again. Now this is Lords and Ladies or Cuckoo Pint. And there's quite a lot of this in the wood. Its another name is wild arum. Now it's got this bit here, it's called a spave. And then there's this central bit here, which has the flowers at the base. There are male flowers and female flowers. Now that I think it's called the spadix. And there's a smell here which attracts midges and insects. So they come along and come down into here and come into the base, and on their way they pollinate the female flowers, and some of them crawl out, some have to wait until the flowers died and then they crawl out and pollinate other flowers, arum flowers, wild arum flowers as well. Now in the winter you've got, in the autumn, late summer, you've got the Lords and Ladies, they call it now, the red, orangey red clumps of berries. Now this is a quiz time. I've got 6 queries for you. So we've got, name that plant from its leaf. So that's the first one. Next one. And the next one. So we're going to see that if you've got that right, it's garlic mustard, ground ivy, and woodruff. And 3 more, and these are more tricky. There's this one, and that one. These 2 are quite alike. So that's muscatel, town hall clock, a Adoxa muscatellina. This one is sanicle. And this one is pignut. All these are found in the wood. So now we're going on into May. The colour changes. So it's been blue and now it's changing into white. You can see here there's a path through, and there would definitely be a smell here because this is wild garlic and it's got lots of names. It's called stink bombs by some people, stinking nanny, stinking onions, and Londoners lilies. And it certainly is quite a pungent smell. You'll notice it, the smell, before you see the flowers and plants. There it is. It doesn't usually mix with the bluebells. It's usually in a quite separate place. There it is, Ranson's Allium ursinum, and there's the flower. Now there was a lot of this herb Paris in the wood. Some of them is meant to have 4 leaves. Some of these hadn't read the book because some of them had 5 leaves. It's got greeny black of bracts, and you can see the dark purpley black ovary here. Another ancient woodland indicator species. And here's the pignut. Took a bit of looking for because it's quite difficult to be seen with the other green things before it flowers. And you can see here it's got very, very spindly, sort of feathery leaves. doesn't show up so much in this one. Lots of Solomon seal all along the paths. They've got the flowers often in pairs. They come from the base of the leaves. Sometimes it's with a garden one, but this is definitely the native one. There's a woodland here with the sun again, and Ransons in the front. There's yellow archangel, and this is definitely the native one. Often you'll see the garden one which has silvery leaves, but this one is our native one in the woods. And although there wasn't much of this, it was definitely an early purple orchid out flowering. Here's sanicle, and here you can see the leaves that we saw in the quiz. So we've got garlic mustard here, Alliera petulata, bush vetch we found, and bugle, Ajuga reptans. This is at the far end of the wood. There's a little bridge. This is where there's meant to be a spring, but it doesn't show very much. And if you remember the scene in March, this is what it is. So it's the end of March, end of April, and this is into May. So 2 months has made a massive difference to the general look of everything. So it's just what we've got to look forward to. Now, I've been asked special request that I had to have curtains. And so this is the woodland path, and here are my curtains. So that's the end of spring. It's now June. So hello, summer.